My dad called me a failure and tried to evict me, but he didn't know I bought our family home 3 years ago and secretly saved his business from bankruptcy. It all started on a Tuesday night at exactly 11:47 p.m. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, emitting a harsh, angry vibration that cut through the absolute quiet of my downtown apartment. I knew exactly who it was without even looking at the screen. Only one person ever texted me that late, and it was never to deliver good news. The screen lit up with a name I both loved and dreaded in equal measure. Dad. The message was incredibly short, brutally cold, and straight to the point. We're selling the house tomorrow. Your old stuff will be out on the curb. Don't bother coming by or asking for a handout. I read it once and then I read it twice. The words seemed to swim in the harsh blue light of my phone screen. The house. He wasn't just talking about any piece of real estate. He was talking about the house with the massive oak tree in the front yard that I had fallen out of when I was 7 years old. The house with the drafty garage where I had built my very first computer from spare parts, hiding from the constant, suffocating storm of his disapproval. The house I still foolishly called home in my head, even though it hadn't actually felt like one in well over a decade. My fingers hovered over the digital keyboard. 1,000 incredibly angry replies burned in my mind, begging to be typed. How could you? After everything I've done, you have absolutely no right to speak to me this way. But I slowly deleted every single one of them. Arguing with Arthur Mercer was utterly pointless. It was exactly like throwing fragile glass at a solid brick wall. All you ever got in return were bruised hands and shattered pieces. Instead, I took a deep breath, typed a single word, and hit send. Okay. A moment later, a second message aggressively pushed through, as if my calm and detached reply had only poured gasoline on his fire. And don't expect any more family support. You've been nothing but a massive disappointment to this family. It is time you finally face the real world. A deeply familiar, heavy ache settled directly in the center of my chest. The kind of ache that had been my constant shadow for years. Disappointment. That was the exact word he had maliciously branded me with the day I told him I wanted to build software algorithms. Not residential houses, but he didn't know my world. He had absolutely no idea what it looked like, how it functioned, or what I had achieved. I placed the phone gently back on the nightstand and watched the screen go completely dark. I wasn't angry, not anymore. The hot, burning anger had fizzled out a long, long time ago, leaving behind only a quiet, deep-seated, and exhausting sadness. Because here was the massive secret, the one I had meticulously kept hidden for 3 long years. My father, Arthur Mercer, couldn't sell that house. He didn't have the legal right to do it. He genuinely thought he was throwing me out into the cold, teaching his failure of a son one final harsh lesson about the real world. He had absolutely no idea that he was merely a guest living in my home. I had secretly purchased that exact house 3 years ago through one of my anonymous holding companies, Zenith Properties LLC. I had executed the purchase silently through a third-party lawyer when the bank was literally days away from foreclosing on it after his beloved construction business almost went completely under. He never knew. I let him and my mother Clara continue to live there entirely rent-free, genuinely believing they had heroically weathered the financial storm all on their own. He thought he was ruthlessly cutting me off. He didn't realize he was actively trying to saw off the very branch he was currently sitting on. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep. I knew sleep wouldn't come tonight. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the low hum of the Boston traffic outside my window. And I thought, tomorrow morning is going to be incredibly interesting. He was about to confidently call a real estate agent to sell a house he no longer legally owned. And that specific real estate agent, my younger cousin Kevin, secretly worked for me. A massive storm was coming, but before I tell you exactly how that storm broke and destroyed everything, you need to understand the toxic climate it was born in. You need to understand the Mercer family dynamic. Growing up, our family was never a supportive unit. It was a vicious competition, and I was perpetually in last place. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden sun my father orbited around. Marcus was the captain of the varsity football team. He got decent grades without ever opening a book, and he had a charismatic smile that could easily charm a snake. More importantly, he was an exact carbon copy of my father. He absolutely loved the smell of fresh sawdust and wet concrete. He wanted to join the family business, Mercer and Son Construction, from the moment he was old enough to hold a plastic toy hammer. I was entirely different. I wasn't interested in sports or physical labor. I was the quiet, introverted kid who meticulously took apart the family radio just to see how the internal circuits worked, while Marcus was out sweating on the field. I was locked in my room teaching myself to code on a clunky second-hand computer I had bought with money saved from mowing neighborhood lawns. I clearly remember one specific Saturday afternoon like it was yesterday. I was maybe 15 years old. I had just finished creating my very first simple program, a little text-based adventure game. I was buzzing with pure electric excitement. The feeling of creating something entirely from nothing was pure magic to me. I sprinted downstairs to show my dad. He was sitting in the living room with Marcus, holding up a massive, gleaming gold trophy Marcus had just won at a regional track meet. "Look at this, Julian," my dad boomed, his deep voice echoing with immense pride. He slapped Marcus on the back so hard, my brother actually stumbled forward. "State championships are next month. That's my boy, a real certified winner." Marcus grinned arrogantly, holding the gold trophy like a king holding a royal scepter. I nervously held up my heavy laptop. "Dad, look what I made. It's a computer game. I wrote the entire code myself from scratch." He glanced dismissively at the screen, his eyes immediately glossing over the complex lines of code. He squinted in annoyance. "What is all that absolute gibberish? A game? For God's sake! Julian, are you still playing with childish toys? Your brother is out there building a tangible future, and you're locked in your room staring at a screen. Go on, put that useless thing away. Don't you have actual homework to do?" The magic inside me instantly vanished. It felt exactly like he had maliciously thrown a freezing bucket of ice water on a tiny, fragile flame. I slowly looked over at my mother, Clara, who was quietly watching from the kitchen doorway. She offered me a small, incredibly sad smile, a silent apology, but she said absolutely nothing. She never did. Her silence was its own cowardly kind of agreement. That was the established pattern. Marcus's every minor achievement was loudly celebrated with an expensive steak dinner. My academic awards were consistently met with a dismissive grunt and a sarcastic, "Well, let's see if that useless piece of paper pays the bills someday." He wasn't just praising Marcus. He was actively using Marcus's success as a blunt weapon against me. It was a constant, unspoken message. "You are not enough. You are not the son I wanted." I quickly learned to stop trying to show him my world. I built massive emotional walls around it, fiercely protecting that small flame of passion from the constant chilling wind of his disapproval. My room became my isolated sanctuary. My computer became my only best friend. And in that quiet, lonely space, I started slowly building my own future. One line of code at a time, a massive future he would never see coming. The absolute breaking point finally arrived the humid summer. I turned 18. For weeks. My father had been loudly talking about my future at the company, as if it were a foregone conclusion. He had cleared out a small, dusty office for me at Mercer and Son Construction right next to his. He had even proudly had a custom plaque made for the door. "Julian Mercer, junior project manager. He simply couldn't conceive of a universe where I wouldn't desperately want it. That night, the four of us were sitting at the dinner table. My dad loudly cleared his throat, a sound that always meant a grand, important announcement was coming. "So, Julian," he began, pointing his fork at me, "you'll start on Monday, 7:00 a.m. sharp. I'll personally introduce you to the foreman at the new downtown site. It's time you finally learned this business from the ground up." Marcus smirked maliciously from across the table. "Don't be too hard on him. Dad, he's probably never held a real hammer in his entire life." I put my fork down. My heart was pounding violently against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was now or never. "I'm not coming in on Monday," I said, my voice noticeably quieter than I intended, but completely firm. My father's proud smile instantly froze. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" I said. "I'm not coming in," I repeated, significantly louder this time. I looked him directly in the eye. "I've officially accepted a full academic scholarship to MIT. I'm moving to Boston to study computer science." A heavy, incredibly suffocating silence violently crashed over the table. My mother's hand flew to cover her mouth. Marcus's arrogant smirk vanished, quickly replaced by the look of genuine, stunned shock. My father just stared at me, his face slowly turning a deep, dangerous shade of purple. The thick veins on his neck visibly stood out. "MIT Boston?" he finally roared, violently slamming his heavy fist on the table, making the ceramic plates jump. "You're carelessly throwing away a guaranteed secure future, a massive family inheritance for some ridiculous pipe dream." "It's not a pipe dream," I yelled back, my own voice rising in defense. "It's my dream. It's what I'm actually good at." "Good," he screamed, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "You're good at hiding in your room. I'm offering you a real life, a real salary, a tangible business, and you're spitting directly in my face for some glorified video game degree. If you walk out that door and go to Boston, don't you dare ever come back expecting a single dime from me. You won't have a family, you won't have anything, you'll be completely on your own." Tears were rapidly streaming down my mother's face. "Arthur, please," she desperately whispered, but he completely ignored her. I stood up, my hands violently shaking, but my internal resolve had never been clearer in my entire life. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. "I'll be on my own." I walked straight out of the dining room, went up to my bedroom, and immediately started packing my bags. That night, the fragile foundation of our family permanently cracked. The next few years were an absolute blur of relentless, exhausting hard work. I massively thrived at MIT. For the first time in my life, I was finally surrounded by brilliant people who spoke my language, who saw my passion not as a weird, childish hobby, but as an incredibly powerful tool. I worked 3 different part-time jobs to cover my basic living expenses, stubbornly refusing to ask my parents for a single cent. The final nail in the coffin of our relationship came during a Thanksgiving break my junior year. I had just started a small, highly ambitious project in my cramped dorm room with 2 friends. We were developing a revolutionary data compression algorithm. The house was packed with loud relatives. My Aunt Carol, who had a special irritating talent for asking the most invasive questions, cornered me by the fireplace. "Julian, darling," she cooed loudly, "tell me, what is it you're doing out there in Boston, still tinkering with those silly little computers?" Before I could even formulate an answer, my father strode over a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand. "He's starting a company," he said, the word heavily dripping with thick sarcasm. "Tell them all about it, Julian." I felt a dozen pairs of judgmental eyes turn to me. "It's a software startup," I began, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. "We're working on an algorithm that could make massive data storage much more efficient." Marcus sauntered over and aggressively draped a heavy arm over my shoulder. "Don't get too technical, little brother. You'll bore everyone to death," he said with a loud, condescending chuckle. Basically, he's trying to sell invisible fake stuff on the internet. Meanwhile, Mercer and Son just landed the massive Sterling Mall contract. Now that's real business. You can actually see it. The entire room erupted in polite, mocking laughter. My dad proudly clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "That's my boy building the real world, not playing in the imaginary clouds." The humiliation was a painful physical thing. I looked around the room, and not a single person met my eye, except for my mother, who just gave me that same helpless, sad little smile. That was it. That was the exact moment I made a conscious, unbreakable decision. I would never again share my professional life with them. My massive success would be entirely my own. I excused myself, walked out into the freezing November air, and booked a flight back to Boston for the very next morning. As I stood there, I made a silent vow. One day, they would understand, but I wouldn't be the one to explain it to them. The real world would. And now, all these years later, as I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling after receiving that text, I realized that day had finally arrived. Update 1, the next morning. I was sitting in my private office by 7:00 a.m., not my massive glass-walled corner office at Zenith Innovations headquarters downtown, but my quiet, highly secure private office that I kept under a different company name, Zenith Properties, LLC. This was the absolute nerve center for the secrets I kept. My executive assistant, Maya. A brilliantly sharp woman who knew significantly more about my life than my own family did, quietly placed a hot coffee on my desk. "The stage is completely set. Julian," she said softly. "Kevin is in his office, nervously waiting for the call." Kevin was my younger cousin. He had severely struggled after college, and I had quietly funded his expensive real estate certification and helped him secure a top job at a premium firm, a firm my parent company now held a controlling interest in. He was the only other person in the entire family who knew I owned that house. At precisely 8:15 a.m., my private secure line rang. It was Kevin. "He's on my other line," Kevin said, his voice a tense, panicked whisper. "He is absolutely not happy. Julian, walk me exactly through it." "Kevin," I said calmly, leaning back in my leather chair. "He called right at 8, said he was Arthur Mercer and wanted to list 124 Elm Street for immediate sale. He aggressively demanded $950,000 for it, said it was extremely urgent. I pulled up the county records exactly like we planned. I told him, 'Sir, I see the official records right here. The property was sold 3 years ago. It's owned by a private corporation called Zenith Properties, LLC. I could perfectly picture my father's face, the arrogant confusion violently turning into explosive outrage. What did he say? He completely lost his mind, Kevin said, breathing heavily. He started screaming, "That's impossible. That's my house. My family has lived there for 20 years. There's been a massive mistake, some kind of illegal fraud." He aggressively demanded to know who was behind this company. He even threatened to sue me and get his vicious lawyers involved. I told him I couldn't legally disclose private client information, Kevin continued, but that I could pass on his contact details to the owner. He practically screamed yes into the phone. "Julian, he sounds like he's about to have a massive heart attack." "He'll be fine," I said, feeling a weary sadness. "You did perfectly, Kevin. Now give him my private number." I stared at my phone, waiting. The silence in the office was absolute. For 3 years, I had operated purely from the shadows. I had secretly saved his failing company, paid his massive debts and securely kept the roof over his head, all while he was relentlessly calling me a disappointment. My phone finally rang. The screen displayed unknown number. I took a deep breath and answered. "This is Julian." The voice on the other end was an absolute roar, distorted by blind rage. "Who the hell is this? Where is the coward owner of Zenith Properties?" I kept my voice perfectly level, a calm island in his hurricane of fury. "You're speaking to him. My name is Julian Mercer. I am the owner." There was a moment of stunned, suffocating silence on the other end. I could hear his sharp, ragged breathing. He was desperately trying to make the pieces fit and entirely failing. "Julian, what kind of sick, twisted joke is this?" he sputtered. "I'm in no mood for your childish games. Put your boss on the phone right now." "I don't have a boss. Dad," I said, the word feeling foreign. "It's my company. I entirely own Zenith Properties, and I legally own the house at 124 Elm Street." "No," he whispered. The single word was filled with a universe of desperate denial. "No, that's literally impossible. You don't have that kind of money. You work at some little tech startup. You drive a beat-up old Honda. How could you possibly?" I had intentionally let him believe what he wanted. I drove a 10-year-old Accord because it didn't draw attention. I had built a flawless facade of mediocrity to protect myself, and now I was violently tearing it down. "I bought it 3 years ago," I explained, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "The bank was about to start immediate foreclosure proceedings. You were 6 months behind on the mortgage. Mercer & Son was on the absolute verge of total bankruptcy. So I stepped in. I bought the mortgage through my holding company and took over the deed. I let you and Mom continue to live there. The mortgage payments you've been making every month, they've been going directly into a private retirement account I set up for you both." The silence on the other end wasn't just shock anymore. It was the devastating sound of a man's entire worldview violently crumbling to dust. "A retirement account," he whispered, his voice barely audible, trembling violently. "Yes, there's over $120,000 in it right now." "But how?" he finally managed to ask, the boiling anger entirely replaced by a fragile, terrifying confusion. "Where did you get that kind of money? Your little startup?" "It's a little more than a startup." "Dad," I said, a massive wave of exhaustion washing over me. "Zenith Innovations is my parent company. Zenith Properties is just a tiny subsidiary." Before he could respond, I ended the call. I needed a moment to breathe, but as I sat there, a new, highly unsettling question formed in my mind. Why now? Why, after 3 years of perfect stability, did he suddenly decide to aggressively sell the house? I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. He answered on the second ring, his voice obnoxiously cheerful. "Hey, little brother, to what do I owe this rare honor?" "Marcus," I said coldly, "I just got off the phone with Dad. He tried to quickly sell the house today." There was a slight, very telling pause. "Oh, yeah. Wow, that's drastic. Is everything okay?" He sounded concerned, but it was an incredibly cheap imitation. "You tell me," I said. "He wouldn't do this without a major reason. The business is totally fine. I made absolute sure of that ass." Another pause, significantly longer. "Well," he said slowly, "Dad was worried about cash flow. He was talking about needing to secure his legacy, make sure Mom was taken care of. It was a blatant lie. I had full, unrestricted access to the financials of Mercer & Son. They were more profitable than they had been in a decade." "Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "did you secretly know? Zenith Properties own the house." The silence on the other end stretched for 15 agonizing seconds. When he finally spoke, his cheerful mask was entirely gone. His voice was flat and incredibly cold. I might have done some quiet digging, he admitted. I saw the patterns. The way our family's massive financial problems just magically disappeared. I put two and two together. The phone felt freezing cold in my hand. So, you knew I was secretly helping them, and what exactly did you tell Dad? I could practically hear the venomous, smug smile in his voice. I just casually suggested that maybe his massive disappointment of a son was making a hostile power play. That maybe you were trying to completely steal everything he'd built. The betrayal was so incredibly profound. It left me breathless. This was a deliberate, malicious act of sabotage born out of pure, venomous jealousy. Marcus couldn't stand that I had massively succeeded on my own terms. So, he tried to burn my world down, using our father as the match. I see, I said softly, and ended the call. I buzzed Maya on the intercom. Maya, cancel my entire afternoon. Book a table for 4 at the Obsidian Room for tonight, the best table they have. Update 2, before the dinner. I had one final devastating piece to move into place. At noon, I had a highly publicized scheduled press conference at Boston City Hall. It was announcing the citywide rollout of Zenith Civic, a revolutionary smart city management software my company had developed. I stood confidently at the podium, flanked by Mayor Harrison and several key city council members. The massive room was packed with flashing cameras and eager reporters. I spoke eloquently about data efficiency, security protocols, and community improvement. Then, Mayor Harrison stepped up to the microphone. I want to say something highly personal. He began looking directly at me. When Julian and his brilliant team at Zenith Innovations first brought this ambitious proposal to us, we were skeptical, but this young man's incredible vision is undeniable. Zenith Software is already saving the city of Boston an estimated $22 million a year. Julian Mercer was just named Forbes Tech Innovator of the Year, and our city is incredibly proud to partner with a hometown genius. The room erupted in deafening applause. I knew that by the 6 p.m. news. My face would be broadcast on television screens across the entire state, including the one in my parents' living room. I was systematically taking away their false narrative. After the press conference, I called my mother. Mom, I've booked a table for 4 at the Obsidian Room tonight at 8:00 p.m. We need to talk. The Obsidian Room? She stammered. Terrified. Julian, we can't possibly afford that. I'm paying, I said firmly. I'll have a private car pick you up at 7:30, at exactly 7:30 p.m. A gleaming jet-black Tesla Model S pulled up to 124 Elm Street from my own car parked discreetly down the street. I watched them emerge. My father's face was a dark thundercloud of resentment. Marcus looked intensely annoyed, but their expressions violently changed when they saw the luxury car and my private driver holding the door. They got in total stunned silence. I arrived at the Obsidian Room first. The Matroy Anton greeted me warmly. Mr. Mercer, your usual table is perfectly ready. Best view in the house. I was seated at a massive circular booth with a panoramic window overlooking the Boston skyline. Right in the center stood a massive skyscraper with the word Zenith glowing in brilliant blue at the very peak. When my family was escorted to the table, they looked completely out of their element, intimidated by the hushed elegance and the extreme wealth surrounding them. They sat down stiffly. My father opened his menu, saw the astronomical prices, and violently snapped it shut. This is ridiculous, Julian, a complete waste of money. It's not a waste if there's a purpose. Dad, I replied calmly. I pointed out the window. Beautiful view, isn't it? See that building, Zenith Tower? My headquarters. I own the top 12 floors. My father stared at the glowing building, his mouth slightly agape. Marcus looked like he had been brutally punched in the stomach. The raw, naked disbelief on their faces was absolute. I ordered the $2,000 chef's tasting menu and a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. The time for childish games was permanently over. "You think I'm a massive failure?" I began, my voice quiet, but carrying unnerving clarity. "Your text last night made that perfectly clear." "So, let's talk about the real world. 3 years ago, your lawyer was actively preparing bankruptcy filings. You were $250,000 in massive debt. You owed $110,000 for lumber materials, $50,000 for machinery you defaulted on, and the IRS was about to place a brutal lien on your assets for $28,000 in unpaid taxes. The bank was actively foreclosing on your house." My father's face went completely pale. My mother's hand violently trembled. "A company called Zenith Properties bought your mortgage and settled every single one of your debts." I continued, my voice like freezing ice. "And then a few weeks later, the CEO of Sterling Logistics called you out of the blue and offered you the biggest construction contract of your life. You called it a miracle." I let the words hang in the heavy air. "It wasn't a miracle, Dad. It was me. I own Zenith. The CEO of Sterling Logistics is on my board of directors. I asked him to give you that contract as a personal favor." My mother let out a small choked sob. "Julian, why wouldn't you tell us? Because every time I tried to share my life, it was violently thrown back in my face," I said. I turned my hardened gaze to Marcus. "And then there's you. You knew I owned the house. You knew I was saving this family. But you couldn't stand the thought of your failure, little brother, holding everything together, so you whispered toxic poison in Dad's ear, telling him I was trying to steal his legacy just to protect your fragile ego." The silence was so thick, it was suffocating. My father looked from me to Marcus, and then out the window at my massive glowing tower. He looked completely defeated. The unshakable arrogance that had defined his entire life had completely evaporated. "The money?" my father rasped, his voice breaking. "You paid all of it?" "Yes," I said, "and the house has been legally mine for 3 years. Marcus squirmed, sweating profusely. "Julian, I'm sorry. I was just jealous. I didn't want to lose my place." I ignored him. I signaled for the check, paid the massive bill, and stood up. "Here are the new rules," I said coldly. "You can continue to live in the house. The retirement fund is yours. But this toxic dynamic is permanently over. Our relationship will now be built on basic human respect. And Marcus, your free ride at Mercer & Son is over. The company has a board now, and I am the chairman." I walked out of the restaurant, leaving them sitting in the total ruins of their lies. I stepped into the cool Boston night air and felt completely, utterly free over the next 6 months. The silence was incredibly peaceful. Zenith Innovations closed a massive global deal, and I finally found true happiness. I visited the grave of my old MIT professor, the only man who believed in me, and told him we finally made it, eventually. The clumsy apology started. Dad texted me an article about my company, saying he was proud. Mom called, crying, admitting she had known about the bankruptcy, but was too cowardly to speak up. Marcus quit the family business and took an entry-level job elsewhere, finally trying to build something real. A year later, I drove past the old house. Dad was fixing the fence. He saw me, stopped, and gave a small, hesitant wave. He told me Mom was making a pie, an invitation to start over. I walked through the gate. The cracks would always be there.